One of the best writers out there for jazz ensemble as well as for concert band is Mike Kamuf. If you don't know that name, you should. He is a great writer out of the Maryland area and also a longtime educator, also a trumpet performer. And I'm really excited to meet with him today on episode number 82 of the Growing Band Director podcast. A little bit about what you can expect from our time together today. First, he's going to be giving a clinic to us that he's done other places and can be found on his website that he does for Alfred. His website is mikekamuf.com. And the clinic is called Start Your Engines, Building Confidence with Less Experienced Rhythm Section Players. So he's got a lot of stuff on here that he presents at state conferences and things like that. And I'm excited to bring those to you today. Also, I'm going to give you a chance to hear some of my recommendations for some of the Mike Kamuf charts that I've bought in the past and I've used in the past, and I think are really good, especially for younger jazz bands. My wife has used them as well, and we like these charts a lot. Mike's also given us a list of charts and concert band pieces that we're going to listen to snippets of as well that he would like you to hear about. And I can tell you they're all great music. Mike is a writer for Alfred as well as for Chose, and has written for University of Northern Colorado Jazz Press and FJH. Hopefully I didn't miss any. He holds a jazz performance and music ed degree from Youngstown State University and a master's in instrumental conducting from George Mason University. Mike's compositions and arrangements have been performed by numerous jazz artists. Mike has performed with the Woody Herman Band and Tommy Dorsey Orchestras and has recorded as a member of the Alan Baylock Jazz Orchestra. He served as an assistant principal trumpet for the Youngstown Symphony Orchestra in the 90s. Mike freelances as a commercial trumpet player in the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. areas. And from my research on Mike's background, he's a longtime educator in Maryland. And it looks to me like he has taught every level from collegiate all the way down through spending a long time as a middle school band director, having done a lot of honor bands, and as I said, now a clinician for Alfred as well. So I really hope you enjoy this episode with Mike. I'm looking forward to bringing it to you. Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for being here with us on the Growing Band Director podcast. How are you doing?
Great, Kyle. Thanks for having me. This is truly an honor to be on the podcast. I appreciate it. Everything's going great. Can't complain about anything.
Great.
In the life.
So I'm looking forward to listening to a lot of your music today and hearing about this clinic called Start Your Engines, which is you subtitle Building Confidence with Less Experienced Rhythm Section Players.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find that with young teachers, especially, the key to the rhythm section is really the key to the whole jazz ensemble. Do you agree?
Oh, totally agree. And that's one of the problems when I started teaching middle school back in the mid 90s. I had only taught high school and for 1 year and a little bit of college level, and then elementary where I didn't have a jazz program. And when I started working with middle school students, I was like, oh my Lord, I have to this is not good. So we're not swinging at all. We're not reading notation right. It's like, so yeah, it's definitely the wheel. It's definitely the engine rather to move the wheels of the band. And we have to really instill confidence in the young musicians. And I've got some tips for that. So sounds like a setup to me. So
that's a setup. Yeah. Yeah. So Start Your Engines, Building Confidence with Less Experienced Rhythm Section Players is so great. We can foster confidence in young rhythm section players. And then you have 5 main keys areas of what we're going to go through. So the first one is called providing the correct gear and encouraging them to purchase the higher quality instruments and accessories.
Right. So and to actually to have it at school too, as best as we can with our budgets. When we're looking at guitars, students are going to show up with the solid body guitars, and those are great for like rock tunes and more contemporary things and funk tunes and that. But to get that sound, we really need a hollow body guitar to get that right sound for the straight ahead jazz sound and the bassy sound, which seems to be really predominant when we're focused on teaching swing to young students. And also, it also works great on Latin American music as well. So finding a hollow body that's affordable. Ibanez makes a great the Art Core series. It's very affordable, not only for school budgets but also for students too. It's a great starting point for a young guitarist. So just that instrument alone is huge. And then for the amps, just finding an amp that works. DV makes a great amp. The Roland Cube 60 is good. The Polytone Mini Brutes are great. The Fender Champion. There's different ones. Model numbers are always changing all the time, but those series are still relevant for the amps. And then
I will just say, and I've said this a couple times on other podcasts episodes. Can you talk a little bit about the settings on the amp in general, what you're looking for in the guitar sound?
And you want it to get
not looking for.
Right. You want it to cut, but also to be complementary to, the times you want it to cut through so that you hear it's there. So I kind of just keep everything in the middle and then make adjustments from there as we're going. Your players also have to have a setting. If they're going to solo, they have to make sure that they are just kind of, for me, that they have a louder setting for soloing and a lower volume for when they're comping and complementing it in the ensemble.
And in general, a warm sound.
We're going for a warm sound, not a bright sound. Right. Yeah. So a little bit more mids, a little bit more lows. Yeah. And then for a rock tune, they can have a different setting especially if they're soloing or whatever. But
sure,
even then, it's, we're still going for those mids and lows, not necessarily the highs.
Great. Let's talk about piano. What do you recommend?
So, the acoustic piano is basically it for everything, but that's not always like, we can't always have that. Right. So it's having any kind of portable keyboard, a Kurzweil, a Roland, KC550 is a great one. And I'm sorry, that's the amps. I'm looking at the wrong thing here. We might want to cut this out. well, I want to say, set me up for the piano again. Sorry.
So what are we looking for on pianos?
So of course we want an acoustic piano because that's the main sound. But if we're traveling, or we're doing a different kind of style tune, an electric keyboard is going to work great. The Kurzweil SP series are pretty sturdy, pretty affordable for most budgets. They work great. And then the Roland KC amp, the KC series, the 550 is pretty portable and pretty powerful. And again, we're looking for not bright sounds. We're looking for the mids and the lows, and not necessarily cutting sounds with our amp settings.
Yeah, and it's really important anytime you have an amplifier, again, to set it at the right level. Because how many bands have you adjudicated where if you just turn the amps down, their score would go up 10 points?
No comment. I heard a couple last week that I was like,
yeah, accepting that the rhythm section is supposed to accompany the horn players. I think that getting that balance is a really, really important thing. Right,
and credit to those horn sections that I heard, they were keeping up with what was going on in the rhythm section too. So there was they were moving some air, but that's not what we want. We want a cohesive unit sound, and the ability to kind of set volumes in the mid level, and then for the piano players, like in a normal acoustic piano setting where you're going to play a little heavier for the louder passages, and it's. So we don't want to compensate with the amp for that. We want to be able to compensate on the instrument for that. So just keeping everything at kind of a general setting is medium levels volume setting is good.
As a quick side note, when we're talking about dynamics in the jazz ensemble, isn't it amazing that if you get your drummer to play the right dynamics, it changes it for everything, right? I mean,
yes,
if you want the band to be really soft, get the drummer to play really soft on the right cymbal or on the hi-hat closed or whatever. And if the drummer does the dynamics accordingly, the entire band is going to do what they hear.
I love showing video clips of Jeff Hamilton to young students because Jeff plays the gamut, and first off, the video quality and the sound quality is really good because these are very recent recordings. Sometimes the kids don't always buy in if it's real grainy or whatever. They tune out or whatever. But it's kind of the production on a lot of the things that Jeff's in is pretty great. So to show him driving an ensemble softly, like in that Mel Lewis tradition that he plays in, and it's so great to be able to show that to students. So yes, absolutely, that dynamic of your drum set player is setting the tone for for the band. One of my mentors used to say, Tony Leonardi, who was jazz studies coordinator at Youngstown State University, was a great mentor and friend to me. He always used to say, I can make a jazz band with a bass player, a drummer, a lead trumpet player, and a lead alto player. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all. And he did it. And those four, I would put lead bone in there too. But those are the key players in getting it all to line up. And if those players all have the same sense of dynamics and of phrasing and of style, we're good to go.
Love it.
So that's just my 2 cents, whatever that's worth.
Of course it's worth. That's why you're here.
Oh, okay.
That's why you're here. Yeah. All right, let's go on to bass. What do you recommend?
Sure. Well, obviously upright is a big concern. If you got that in your program, if you have that to your availability, use it to your advantage. Electric's going to be great for more contemporary tunes, rock tunes, and some funk tunes or whatever. But for the most part, we're gonna if you can use an upright bass, if you have a student that's interested or students that are interested, use it. Now pickups get into a little bit of an issue. There's a lot on the market. My favorite one is the Underwood pickup, which you buy from underwoodpickups.com. It's first off, if I can put it on a bass, anybody can put it on a bass. My wife was like cringing when she saw me like doing this. She's like, "Oh no, well, you're gonna do that." It's like I filed the bridge down just right, got the mics in there. It's very, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's very warm sounding. It's a warm sounding pickup, which is great because it's not some of the pickups that I've used. I'm not going to name names, but they're real bright. Some inconsistent sounds from them sometimes. This one's very consistent sound, and it pairs great with a hard key kickback 12, which is one of my favorite amps because it kicks back and the sound shoots out up to the player and over the ensemble, and not necessarily across, you know what I'm saying, across and into people's legs, and that the sound actually travels out. So that's one of my favorite amps to use with students, and it works great with that Underwood pickup and other bass too. So
great. On here under drums, you say a smaller kit is preferred for jazz, snare drum, bass drum, pedal, one mounted tom, and floor tom.
Yes. And that's I feel that way. I think if we give the kids too much to hit,
yep,
things get a little bit more complicated, right? So a lot of the manufacturers, drum manufacturers, Gretsch makes a great small we call them cocktail kits for small jazz cocktail kits, and their series is the Catalina. The Ludwig's is called Break Beats. I think Questlove like designed that like a few years back, and I think they're still on the market. But the Gretsch Catalina is kind of like a staple for a lot of programs, and it's a very transportable kit. It's a very easy kit to tune and to get the sound good with the ensemble, and it's very durable too.
And for cymbals, you recommend, let's see, include hi-hats, 14-inch, 1 to 2 crash cymbals, 16 to 18 inches, 1 ride cymbal, and others if desired for different colors. And you have a bunch of other things here. For me, I usually I would amend that I would prefer to have 1 crash and 2 rides. In my programs, what I've used, because I just like to have that alternate, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's a preference thing, but I think having, especially if you are someone who like what I like to do is I'd like to feature as many students as possible, to a fault sometimes because we'd be playing for too long.
Yeah, I get you.
That's a whole thing too. But I really like to have students solo and get creative with improvisation and highlight as much as I can. So I think having options for your drummer, especially when you are opening things up for soloists, so that the audience isn't getting the same information all the time, the same timbre, the same color all the time, over and over and over again. At the end, I was using I had a Zildjian swish knocker that really was kind of like very flexible. It could be an extra ride, it could be an extra crash. Again, going back to Jeff Hamilton, watch how Jeff Hamilton uses that China color symbol in his kit. That's a great reference for students too, as to how to manipulate that symbol and use an extra color symbol in the kit. That can really give the ensemble a much mature sound too.
There's also these things called crash rides, which
Mhm.
I have a number of them that I use for different purposes. I
Yeah,
found as I get older and older, I like the kids riding on them less and less because some of the ones they tend to get too boomy on the upper
hmm
frequencies.
hmm
And there's a, if you don't mind, I know you're going to mention a couple cymbal brands that you really like. Can
yeah,
I throw in one that I've had recommended to me that's probably about company's 10 years old that I like
yeah.
and has
Sure.
worked well for us at a pretty cheap price? It's called the Dream Cymbal,
Oh,
and
nice.
you can get whole packs and things, but they sound like really nice cymbals for
I'm
you
writing
know
that down. Dreams.
200 bucks or something like that.
Nice.
I'm not going to say they're better than some of these other high priced ones, but they work really well for school
Okay, now
records.
are they hand hammered or?
Uh, so I don't know. They look like they
Okay,
are, but
yeah,
I haven't seen how they're made. But
right,
if I'm looking for a general symbol that I can use for like, I mean, I have a marching program in addition to all the other things, so
right.
we need 9,000 symbols.
Right. So one of the things that we have to be careful with hand hammered symbols as opposed to non hand hammered symbols is making sure that the students don't bear down real hard on those symbols. They don't have to work as hard for that sound to come out. So if we're using use one of those hand hammered like high end symbols, we're going to talk about in a second. Students can like get if they're like really bearing down, it can wash out the sound of the ensemble. So we have to be really, really careful with those. When I introduced those into the mix, I had to really like, this isn't like your symbol at home. You don't have to work as hard, kind of thing. So
Mm.
it's a different timbre for the kids to get used to as well. So, but I really like the Mine L symbols by Zance. They're really they're also very affordable. We were just talking about affordable symbol. Um, then of course Diligent Pasty and Sabian and all those. But check out Memphis Drum Shop has a YouTube channel where they're the clinician that have different drum set players and clinicians playing kits with the cymbals on them, playing different grooves. You can get a really good idea. I mean, every
Mm.
cymbal is a little different, but you can get that idea of what that particular model cymbal is going to sound like in relation to uh, the drum set itself, and you get a pro playing it. It's great.
That's great.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out.
And for anybody who wants to follow along with this clinic that we're following of Mike's, it is on his website, Mike Kamuf, under free resources. So people are always welcome to check out what we're reading off of as well. For
Yeah.
auxiliary percussion and vibes, obviously we have the biggest thing is congas and vibraphone. If you have
Mhm.
more players in your percussion section.
Right. So you want to be careful with doing too much doubling so that it doesn't and adding too many toys so that it doesn't get overpowering and mask what's going on in the ensemble because that can easily get away from us if we're not paying attention as directors. So one of the things just I'm all for keeping everybody employed
Hmm.
and hands on and everything, but we have to just make sure that we're just not we're not letting things get out of control back there dynamically and the rhythm's getting too busy. Just keeping it simple and making sure they're playing the accents and the music.
Yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
let's listen to one of your charts.
Okay.
How about Stomping at the Savoy? Can you tell us a little bit about that chart?
Yeah, so I got that year that would have been during the pandemic. I wrote this chart, and it turned out really great. But when I got the assignment, I could not get Bill Holman's arrangement for the Stan Kenton Band out of my head.
Hmm.
So I had to like listen to a whole bunch of different small group recordings and kind of come at it from a different way. So on this one, I do it as I do the A sections of the tune over a halftime shuffle groove or a hip hop feel, and then the bridge swings every time. I try to be real careful with the tune. The root movement of the tune on the bridge is a little tricky because it's a lot of what we call half step shifts. E flat dominant to E dominant back to E flat,
Hmm.
and then it goes around the circle a little bit. So I purposely wrote figures that would be accessible to young musicians. I didn't get crazy with it. I kept that in mind as I was writing that, and I think we're going to hear the beginning and a little bit of the ensemble stuff after the
Yep.
solos. So
And this is green cover from Alfred.
yeah, it's coming in at about a 2.5. I would characterize that. I don't think it's right at the 2 level. I think there's
Yeah.
enough. There's some meaty stuff towards the end and the soli section after the solos. That's It's a quote of a Sam Jones tune called "Bittersweet" that gets worked around the trumpets and saxophones a little bit. It's a little melody, but it lies pretty good in this key, and I think it comes off pretty well. But I'd say 2.5.
All right, let's check it out. Here it is.
All right.
That's a great chart.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way that one turned out. And then of course, the musicians playing it are all great players here in the DC area. So
Sure.
it's a lot of my friends are on it. So
Can I?
so it's very cool.
It's nice to have such talented friends. Can I give a couple of charts of yours, or a handful of charts of yours that I've bought over the decades, and can recommend to people? All right.
Yes.
So we're not going to listen to any of these, and all of these are in like I mentioned, that green cover 2.5 series. I'm a believer in using a lot of tunes that are standard tunes. So I like a lot Cantaloupe Island. That's probably one of your more famous ones. Little Sunflower by Freddie Hubbard. If people don't know that tune, it's basically 2 chord changes. I actually featured a singer on that one.
Oh, nice.
And then 2 Cannonball tunes that I really like, Sack of Woe and Styx. If people don't know Styx, that tune is such a great tune. I don't know how much that sold, but that's one of my favorite charts.
Yeah, it's done pretty well. It's a anytime you can take a blues form and do something different to it, it's kind of cool. So the fact that it's a 14-bar blues is it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way all those turned out, and yes, they all do well. And thank you for mentioning those.
I like that you use the Nat Adderley solo in that arrangement.
Yeah.
There's one version that it's one of the live Cannonball versions of that tune that is just like, it's so smoking. All right.
It's Mercy Mercy, I think, is what you're talking about.
That's the one. Oh man, if I could play the trumpet like that, whew.
He's on fire on it.
All right, let's go on to setup.
Sure. So, I think we have to use and I had a problem with this when I taught at Baker for all those years, because my room was set up in tiers. So that's really that can make rehearsal problematic. But I found a workaround. It took me several different tries and lots of time of experimenting, years of experimenting actually. But I think we have to, as directors, start fostering a setup that's going to allow for verbal and nonverbal communication from the students in the rhythm section, so they start working together as a team. So trying to have a setup where at least the guitar and the piano have or have a sight line, and then a setup where your piano, bass, and drums have a sight line. I like to keep the guitar on line with the saxophones, and then kind of the piano on line with at the end there too. I think that's pretty standard. But I think that having everybody in the rhythm section having some sort of form of communication with one another is really, really important, and having that sight line. And then the amp placement is huge.
Big time.
We want to make sure. So we want to make sure if we're using a bass amp that's not like I mentioned the Harkey kickback earlier, where the sound you turn it on, it kicks back, the sound shoots out. So if we're not using something like that, we have to get it up off the ground so that it projects a little bit. So that's huge and important. And we want to make sure that the placement of it is behind the bass player,
correct,
not in front of the bass player. They can't hear what's coming out of the amp if it's in front. I don't know how many times I see that, especially with young directors. It's like, we have a saying, don't do that, so just don't do that, So we want to make sure that we can hear, the student can hear what's coming out of the amp itself.
And that they're far enough in front of it. Like I was told 2 to 3 feet, so you're not covering it. It's almost like there's an ice cream cone of sound coming out, and you're in that sound, but not close.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah,
that's a great way of looking at it. I'm going to use that. I like that. And I'm stealing that. So yeah, we want to make sure that that's happening. And you don't want to be too close to the amp either, because then you're going to get feedback. So that's a great way of doing it too. And then with the guitar, we want Mike Christensen, who does clinics for Mel Bay and everybody. He was telling me this, and I never really thought about this, because when I do this clinic and I'm showing my PowerPoint, I have a diagram of this, and he was saying I wouldn't do what's on that diagram, and I hadn't really thought about what was on the diagram, but the amp in the example I use is on the wrong side. It's on the pickup side. So he's saying, no, you don't want that. You want the amp on the next side of the guitar. So I hadn't thought about that. So that has to sit back as well. So that's something that, I guess I had done maybe correctly and incorrectly over the years, because I really wasn't paying attention to that. But
why is that? But what was his reasoning?
For feedback.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's something to think about and experiment. But he was mentioning that to me, and when I was presenting this clinic, and he happened to come through, and I thought that was a great thing a great piece of knowledge to be aware of, at least. So if we're getting feedback, we need to switch it to the other side. But again, the amp has to be behind the player, so that they can hear themselves and not be in a power contest to play louder.
And obviously, the drums and the bass need to have visual contact. And I actually did this exercise on Monday with my band. I had my guitar player, my bass player, and my drummer all hold up their right hand, and then keep the beat together on their lap or something like that. To get the groove going, because obviously not only are they all playing quarter notes or a variation of, but they're all playing with their right hands in the same thing. So especially the drums and the bass, getting that groove, the visual groove, is big.
Right. Oh yeah. And here's something else too, and this is from one of my other clinics, and this isn't in this clinic per se. But just that time alignment between your bass player's appendages and your drummer's appendages, everything has to be working together at the same time. And what ends up happening, I think, sometimes with young directors, is they overshoot with the literature, or they don't have the skill set yet to get that information across in there, because their knowledge is developing.
Yep.
We're always all developing, but you know what I mean. But they're not there yet, but they're overshooting. Sure. So
been there.
We've all been there, right? So one of the things to think about is that your lit choice, making sure that it's really repetitive. And this is something that, like I said, I mentioned in one of my other clinics. If you're let's say you're playing a blues tune with your kids, and the bass line is rewritten differently every chorus of the chart. Why?
Right.
If it's a young jazz chart, really, why? There's no reason for that. I mean, because we're not building confidence. We're at this point, that doesn't build confidence at all, because the bass player, especially if they're like they've been playing an orchestra and they're still just getting used to playing in half position, that's not good at all. So we want to make sure that, feel free to write it up. That's one of my pet peeves. I think that sometimes writers, when they're writing for young jazz ensembles, don't get that because they
Mm-hmm.
have maybe they haven't been in the classroom. I don't know, but that happens. So don't be afraid to take a blues line and just keep using it over and over again, or a bass line that works. You know what I mean? Like a
Yeah,
bass line
for
that
sure.
doesn't get rewritten. There's no reason in that. If you look at the bass lines in my charts for all those young jazz ensembles, I don't do many variations. If I have to do a rhythmic variation because where I put a chord, yeah, but I do that on purpose so that builds confidence. And I think that's something that we have to look at. All right, I got
No,
on my soapbox on that. Sorry.
no, it's great. It's great. All right, so that's set up. Let's go on to one of your other charts.
Sure.
Compared to what? Tell us a little bit about this chart.
So this is a tune that Eddie Harris and Les McCann recorded in Montreux, Switzerland in 1960. It was written by Eugene McDaniels, who was an activist um, at the time in the late 60s. And I believe Roberta Flack recorded this before Les and Eddie did. And it became part of their Swiss movement album for Atlantic Records, which also yielded "Cold Duck Time," which is kind of
Sure.
another great tune that has it's that soul jazz type groove and feel to it. And this tune, it it was really fun to get this assignment. But if you listen to the original recording, they don't get to the tune for like 3 minutes. There's this huge long introduction, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? So I took a snippet of it and used it in the introduction, and then the introduction of the tune actually becomes developmental material later on in the chart, which I'm not sure we get. Do we get to that in the?
I don't
No,
remember.
no, yeah, actually, you do. We're going to hear that. We're going to hear we're going to hear that development after the solo section
Yep.
going into the shot. We're not going to hear the shot, but we're going to get a snippet of that. So if folks are familiar with that, you'll hear that chromatic walk up, as I call it, that Les McCann does. It's a 3-minute chromatic walk by the original recording, but
Great.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. This was a fun one to do, and there's even like a little the bass line is also uses the one lick in "I Can't Turn You Loose," which is, of course, among other things, was a great song that Aretha Franklin recorded and many others, but it was also the Blues Brothers theme song. So there's some interplay on that in the shot chorus too.
So this is of the grade 2.5 level as well. I'll also mention
Yes.
it's clear of your public school teaching experience when you write these charts. You've already alluded to that originally, but I think grade arrangers have that knowledge of the level they're writing for and what they can and can't do. So thank you for that. Here's compared to
Thank
what?
you. Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way that one turned out. And yeah, soul jazz was the term I was talking about earlier. I think that tune's kind of the epitome of that kind of groove. And if directors check that out, check the original out. Just beware that there's you may want to listen to that before you play for your students. There's a little colorful language in the original of that. Maceo Parker has a great version that's a lot clean. There's no problem with it. It's very kid friendly. So
great. All right, let's next go on to your section about notation concerns with rhythm sections.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that we have to get across to students, and how I did this, and it took me, I alluded to that when I got to Baker about how kind of everything was a mess and I didn't understand what to do with a jazz band. The first thing that I did my second year doing jazz band, not my first year, but the second year doing jazz band at the middle school, it wasn't a class, so it was everybody stayed after school kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I had the rhythm sections come without the horn section, I think 2 or 3 times, because I could not deal with all these horn players. You know what middle school children are like, right?
Sure.
So
sure.
like just like I just couldn't deal with. Okay, I gotta teach this student right here. You guys need to be quiet for a minute. So it's like the workaround on that for me was to pull those students in separately and address these concerns about notation. And I think, and this also goes with knowing your role in the rhythm section too. Not so much in young jazz ensemble music, in the beginning jazz ensemble music, everything's pretty much written out, but we still have lots of concerns to get to. So there are different things that we have to talk about in the music, especially in the guitar parts, because the guitar parts are going to have, there's going to be slash notation, which means they're comping. There's going to be the rhythmic notation, which means they can play the chords, but over the rhythm that's printed. And then, of course, they're going to have, any kind of, they're going to have melodic material as well. So, or figures that they have that are all written out. So we want to make sure that they understand their role and what all these different things mean. And they're going to have some concerns about chords and what to do. Thank goodness, a lot of the charts now come with the chord sheets. And we do that. And my best advice is, if you're not familiar with that, is to make sure that you have somebody that's a go-to that can come in and help a little bit. I've been very fortunate over the years that I've had students that get into it, that study with others, and I've had other former students come back and help me out over the years. So that's creating a system like that for yourself is really good. And then in the piano parts, just understanding that, maybe you need to leave some things out. Maybe it's overwritten for your ability level at this point. So making sure that we address those concerns. But again, as the music advances, we're going to see those same notational things that the guitars are going to be seeing from the get-go. Is we're going to see slashes, we're going to see rhythmic figures, and we're going to see notes all written out. And then some of the young jazz ensemble stuff in our grade 2 category for Alfred and with some of the other publishers, we're starting to cue chords in the piano parts now. So that's for the more advanced players playing it. That they understand what's going on and can do that. But younger students might need that explained to them. Just if you want to take the time to explain the theory about what's going on behind them, great. And if not, that's fine too. But there is an option. And then of course bass, again, at this level, most everything's written out. They may have some chord changes as well. So if you have an advanced player, you can explain. You can go here. And again, with those bass parts, again, don't feel free to rewrite if you need to, or repeat or reuse material that happens earlier in the chart, just to gain that confidence, so the students gain that confidence. And then the drum parts, if you've got a student who's they kind of understand how to play kit a little bit, and they've been playing in the band class in the percussion section, they're used to looking at one part at the same time, not multiple things happening at the same time. So just getting kids to understand, hands, feet, stems up or hands, stems down or feet. There's a great it used to be on the PASIC site, but if it comes up in a Google search. It's called Basic Beats by Steve Houghton. It's basically like a 4-page handout that PASIC made years ago that describes the nomenclature to the students and in very basic terms that middle school students can understand and young musicians can understand. and then it also notates out basic swing grooves, different swing grooves, different rock grooves, and different bossa grooves, which is right in the wheelhouse of a beginning jazz ensemble, right? So that's a great handout. Again, it's Basic Beats by Steve Houghton. You can just search it on the internet; it comes up. So it's not on PASIC's site anymore, but I think it's floating around out there in the interwebs. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice to hear you as a established arranger and writer say those things, because I've been doing those things for years. Like whatever your bass player needs to do to be able to play, whether they're starting with roots only, or you write your own bass line for them to play and
Absolutely.
they play that instead, or if the piano player, if you write a part for them before you ever hand it out and you hand them your part, whatever they need to do to be able to play. I've had drummers who need to read everything on the paper, and drummers who can learn it all by ear, right? Because some fills, some drum parts, if you play what's there, it's killing. And others, it's like, I'm going to ignore half of this, but I'm going to play what the pro drummer played, right? It's really about what's going to swing and what's going to be at your kid's level for confidence.
Right. Well, you have to meet the kids where they're at. And that's exactly it. You put that very well, Kyle. I agree totally. We have to make sure that we're being true to the music, but we have to be true to the students and make sure that they're making the music come off and they're feeling good about themselves.
All right, let's listen to another chart.
Okay, cool.
Which one's up next? Hot House. This is a Tad Dameron tune, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And this was it's like features trumpet and alto. This is more for this is our grade. This is the Blue Cover Jazz Band series. So this is more like a 3.5. The angularity of the melody of this tune really makes it a 3.5. Just to get I put it just in the alto 1 and trumpet 2 parts. The real angular stuff. So I didn't give it to everybody. Kind of on purpose. Yes, yeah. That was.
And again, like I really like having charts where you can listen to historical recordings in addition to the arrangement. So this is one of those. Let's check it out. Hot House. Okay. Such a great chart. That solis kicking.
Thank you. Yeah, I always love writing sax solis and just making those lines come off and making it build. And I got away with some crunchy voicings there on the bridge too, so that was good.
Hey, so while we're at it, let's listen to another tune too. Do you want to do one of the other jazz ones we haven't done, Do you want to do a concert band tune
Sure.
next?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Tell us about Sweet Emma.
Well, Sweet Emma is a tune by Nat Adderley. This is a new one that's coming out this year. It's in the green cover. It's a two and a half. It's. I think we put a key change in towards the end, which I don't think we're going to hear. Or we may hear the beginning of it. And the tune is Nat's tribute to Sweet Emma Barrett, who was um, the leader of the first Preservation Hall Jazz Band. Really, she was Ain't Gonna Give You None of My Jelly Roll was one of her tunes. So she great piano player, just really soulful. And Nat wrote this 16 bar, it's kind of like another soul jazz type tune, in and kind of as a dedication to her and an appreciation to her. And it's a lot of fun. I put a chorale on the beginning, kind of like the chicken, that kind of thing. And it works out pretty good. It's got solo space for trumpet and alto. And there's a breakdown section, which I think we're going to hear, and then it goes into a shout, which it modulates. Pete Barenbrake does a great job of finding these nugget tunes that are like just so good. And this was a lot of fun. Pete's our editor at Alpha. He's the jazz projects editor, and he's the master at finding these tunes and then like working with the writers to make sure it works. Obviously, with this catalog, it's an amazing collection of charts. So he's the master. So when he says, I want you to check this out," then of course I check it out, and it was like, this is a great tune. I had not heard this tune until he asked me to write an arrangement on it. And
all right,
it's great. Yeah.
All right, here's Sweet Emma. It's a great chart, and I'm sure that will sell really well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really happy with the way that turned out. Yeah. Yeah, great tune too. I never, like I said, never heard it before. So
All
until I
right.
was asked.
So the next section of your presentation is called "Working as a Team: Getting Your Rhythm Section to Groove." Right. So what's that all
Yeah.
about?
So one of the Alfred products that kind of I really like it, and I think it's if I were a high school teacher, I would definitely be using it. It's a little bit uh, not I want to say advanced, but it's not enough of the bare bone basics for middle school students. But it's the big picture concepts, and the textbook is called the Rhythm Section Workshop, and it was a collaboration between Shelley Berg, Fred Hamilton, Lou Fisher, and Steve Houghton, and they collaborated on writing material for developing rhythm sections, basically. And one of the key points that they talk about in the textbook is that they kind of define like some of these terms that we use every day, but in a jazz setting. So like the groove is the constant subdivision of groove is constant energy channeled into subdivision. Um, and subdivision is breaking down the pulse, of course, into smaller portions, which we all know. And then they kind of talk about clarity and deference, and they kind of clarity kind of and deference kind of act hand in hand. So like
Mm-hmm.
if we play too loud, if we if we play with the wrong technique, if we play uh, just not in the correct style, that's 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 not clear. That's not that we're not providing clarity for the band. And that's really that's part of the goal and the teamwork that has to happen
Yep.
in the rhythm section is we need that clarity.
And
So
and 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 I'm going to jump in real quick. And one of the
yeah,
some of the struggles as a high school teacher, because you have kids who are starting to come into their own and start really being able to play, is getting them to play less and knowing when to play so that they don't, because if everybody plays probably half of what they can, then you'll have a better, more clear
I
group.
don't know. I don't know how many times I say the phrase "less is more." It's
That's right.
like when I'm working with kids, it's like this. No, don't give me everything that you know. Just play the time, play the groove, have fun with it, but you don't need to be doing all that. So yeah, and that's hard as directors because we don't want to stifle that excitement that's going on, but at the same time, everybody has to understand their roles too. So it's a slippery slope. We have to. That's you bring up a good point, Kyle. It's really hard to do that at times. But that's part of our job too, is to make it all come off right. So anyway, so then clarity kind of leads us into their topic of deference, and that comes from kind of yielding to one another in the rhythm section, especially guitar and piano. Like if we're comping at the same time, are we comping in the same register, or maybe not comp at the same time at all? I just did an honors band this last weekend where we worked it out in specific spots where I let them have some autonomy in that, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like okay, not you're all playing too similarly here, so it's too much information for the band here at this point. So let's make sure that we're deferring to one another here, and you have to figure that out. So and of course they like that too, because then they're not playing every single measure of every single tune as well. So and it gives them a break too. So just kind of deferring to one another, knowing when knowing when it's okay, like in a comping situation where it sounds okay,
Mm-hmm.
both piano and guitar can comp at the same time, and knowing when to get out of it. So if it's kind of cluttered and it's not clear as to what's going on, then it's probably time to employ
Playlist.
employ some deference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
I'm going
Yeah.
to jump to the last one on here, the listening, because there's active listening where we have all of our kids sit and listen, and you analyze and you talk about what you're hearing and you try to emulate and copy and play with the
Mhm.
recording and record yourself and all
Yeah.
that. But there's also, I want to promote the passive listening. To me, I liken it to secondhand smoke. Like if anytime your kids are in your band room, anything you can have playing, it gets in there somehow, even if they're not actively listening to it.
Yeah. Oh, Paul Lucchese is one of my dear friends. He's now teaching at Fresno City College, but he was at Buchanan High School in Fresno, California. And he would begin each of his jazz ensemble rehearsals with listening. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's so good. And I adapted that. So when I saw him do that, I said, well, I did it quite frequently, but I didn't start.
Yep.
And I didn't start with it. I incorporated it into every rehearsal. And I thought it was so important. And now YouTube in the classroom. If you can do that, we would watch some historically significant performances too that exist. So that was great too. And just making those connections, it's really important. And then
And
getting the kids to just listen as an
yeah.
ensemble too is another whole part of that as
And
well.
one of the things that's been happening a lot more recently that I think is the word is spreading is getting your kids to move and dance to that music as they're listening to it. Sometimes
Yeah.
even singing rhythms, playing rhythms with, like I'll do certain things to Brush's backing track, but why don't I put on, a tune by Clark Terry and have us do it to that rather than a backing track.
Right,
So
right,
there's
right,
so many
right.
different ways to participate in that listening process.
Yeah. And I'm going to date myself here like tremendously, but the days of turning on, TV or your media, dialing up your media, however you're watching it, and seeing jazz on television is unfortunately it's not in the mainstream. And I grew up in an era where, like my mom had the television on while she was cooking, and the Merv Griffin show was on, and there's Jack Sheldon and Ray Brown, and there's the Tonight Show band, and so we have to help the students make those connections. So the more that we can play,
Yep.
like you're talking about, Kyle, the more that we can put it out there for the kids, help them make the connections,
And
the better
and
off
and and any of
their playing
those
our
and
ensemble is going to be.
and any of those shows that still use those bands are on too late and the kids are in bed. So,
Right. Yep.
great.
Yep.
All right, let's listen to your last jazz
Yeah.
chart that we're choosing for today, "In the Still of the Night," which is a
Okay.
great standard tune. Why don't we listen to it first and then tell us a little bit about the process afterwards? I got to tell you, I hate cutting up any of those charts because, I've told you, the whole thing's great, but in the essence of time,
Well,
the
no, in the
demo,
interest of
yeah.
time, yeah.
So
Yeah.
isn't that a Cole Porter tune?
It is a Cole Porter tune. That's another new one that's coming out this year. And the 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 trick, not trick, the problem that happens with arranging that tune is that the form of the song is so long; it's 72 measures. So it's like, okay, how am I going to break this up? So and make this playable? So that we heard the first chorus and then a little bit of the shout. So the solo section ends up being four 16 measure sections plus a little 8-bar interlude in there to a little bit of the form. So it's like two soloists, 8 measure interlude, two more soloists, and then into the shout, which we truncated the form for the shout too, because we weren't going to put three 72 measure choruses
Right.
in the chart. So it was a little bit of a struggle there with the development after the solo section. What are we going to do? And so it just whittled it down to a full ensemble thing and a recap of the tune, the latter half of the tune or latter section of the tune. Yeah. So it worked. I think it turned out great. And of course, the band's killing on it.
Yeah.
On the recording.
Can I point out one more thing the band directors can do when they're working on charts?
Absolutely, please.
Take out backgrounds when you can. Terry White tells me that a lot, that, you know, he's asked as an Alfred writer and a writer from other places, they're asked to write because it gives security to the chart and it gives security to the soloist. But if you have soloists who are playing and you can open up for longer choruses than what's written, as well as taking out backgrounds to give this soloist more space.
Right. So absolutely. I mean, I do that with groups. You take it out, especially if you've got a burning soloist and you've got somebody that's really into it. And then especially if you're opening up solo sections too, you know, like say you're doing a blues even with your students and there's like printed backgrounds. Well, don't keep playing those backgrounds every chorus because that's giving the same information to the audience. I mean, the kids might need that at first as you're going along to like, okay, I know where I'm at in the form kind of thing, and then take it away from them because that's too much of the same information for the audience over and over again. Yeah.
Great. All right, let's get on to the last section, the last section of the clinic, which is entitled Approaching Different Styles and Grooves. And you break this into the swing groove, the bossa nova groove, and the rock groove.
Right. So basically what this is, and when I do this in the clinic is I actually scroll scores or I work with a live rhythm section and I take the audience and the group through what are some of the pitfalls of the different styles. Swing is, of course, the cornerstone of this style, and we want to make sure that everybody kind of has a grasp on that. Just getting just getting the right ride cymbal pattern to dance and not be, you know, like too stiff. Although sometimes when you listen to old school drummers, that, you know, it was notated as dotted 8/16, and some of them kind of did that. I mean, you know, you listen to how tight Mel Lewis's ride cymbal pattern is, it's very tight. So it's kind of a preference thing. So you want to make sure that we have that kind of thing happening. We have that time alignment happening in the rhythm section. If we're doing something that's kind of rooted in the Count Basie style, are you having the guitarist, you know, like are they doing the right technique? Are they doing downstrokes with the accents on 2 and 4, or are they comping in a different manner? And that's a good way when we're talking about clarity and deference on a swing chart, making sure that if it's a tune in that kind of style that the guitarist is actually playing in the right style. That helps with clarity as well. So and making sure that everybody's swinging the eighth notes and everybody kind of has an understanding of that, and that's pretty big. As far as the bossa nova goes, do we understand the clave rhythm? Which clave rhythm is it? Do we understand it? And are we putting the accents in the right spot? Is your drummer actually playing a 2-measure pattern for that clave pattern, or are they playing a cheater groove? And that's okay if they're playing a cheater groove, but try to get that 2-bar pattern, whether it's a 3/2 or 2/3 or whatever variation of it is, making sure that that's happening, and that the bass part sometimes what I hear and that is that the bass drum and the bass notes don't always line up with young musicians, and they kind of should highlight each, like the parts should kind of work in tandem with one another. So if you got a bossa and any kind of Latin a groove going and things aren't lining up and it's not sounding good, that's probably where the problem is.
That's awesome.
It might be happening in the bass drum, might be happening in the bass if they're not on the page, but it's most likely your bass drummer's foot or your drummer's foot.
One question. I mean, typically we use 3/2 or 2/3 clave throughout the rhythm section. Are there ways to use like a 2/3 and a 3/2 at the same time within a rhythm section?
I'm not the guy to ask on that one.
Okay, all right.
I guess no. I guess you could if the accents are if I think if the players are strong enough and the groove is, I'm not sure that that would give. I don't know.
Okay,
I'm probably not the person to ask on that. Yeah,
that's what I
Michelle
get for
Fernandez would be
that's.
the person.
I'll ask Michelle.
You went off the cuff. You asked
That's what I
Michelle. You
get
asked
for asking.
Michelle.
All right,
I'm going to defer. Speaking of deference, I'm going to defer to her on that one. Yeah.
wonderful. And let's talk about rock.
Yeah. Just making sure the students don't overplay, because as soon as they get like a tune like that, I think what ends up happening is they're going to overplay. Especially again, drums can start adding stuff and just making sure that that if they're taking liberties with what's printed on the page, making sure that it's not getting in the way of the arrangement itself, and it's if they're giving a variation of the groove that's on the page, making sure that it's not conflicting with what's going on the ensemble and sending all kinds of misinformation out to the ensemble, because that easily happens on rock tunes with students, and it just gets the volume goes up and then they start overplaying, and it's like,
especially if you have a drummer who's like, I've been waiting 3 years to play this groove, and then they just rock instead of like actually being musical and playing rock.
You're right. It's like, and they just blow the chart off, and you're like, no, this is not how this works. But this is not how any of this works. We want to make sure that they're kind of being true to the arrangement, and that's another thing I explain to students, no matter what the style it is. And we talk about this in any ensemble: if the arranger walked in the room or the composer walked in the room, would they be happy with what's going on?
Sure.
It's kind of like my thing with any group that I'm with, and I think that's overplaying like in a style like that. It's like the arranger would not dig that.
Classic.
So don't do that. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read through. You have some resources here. I'm going to read for everybody to get these titles and write them down. Again, they can find them on your website as well, MikeKamuf.com, on the free resources area. And then I want to talk a little bit about the concert band side of things as well.
Yeah.
So some resources: Rhythm Section Workshop for Jazz Directors. That's the one you mentioned earlier. For piano, the Jazz Piano Handbook by Michelle Weir. Playing Jazz Piano by Bob Mintzer, and the Jazz Keyboard Toolbox and the Jazz Pianist. Those are all tunes. For guitar, for guitar, Jazz Guitar Harmony. For bass, The Total Bassist. And for drums, Big Band Drumming at First Sight and Big Band Drumming Philosophy. Get it? Philosophy by Steve Fittick.
Yeah, those Steve's drum books are incredible resources for developing drummers in the jazz band, especially for students that let me kind of pedal back. The big band drumming at first sight literally is taking them through. It's kind of what I was explaining about with that Steve Houghton handout. This breaks it down with charts and recordings, and it's a great resource, an invaluable resource. And then the philosophy one, that's great too, because it breaks down how to play fills in relation to the ensemble figures that are happening in the band. So it's written in terms that students can understand.
So, Mike, I've known your name for a long time, and it's always been on the jazz side of things. But I did see in as we said in your bio earlier, that you have a master's in a master's in instrumental conducting as well. So how long have you been writing for concert bands? I guess on the published side of things.
We started about 2014, I guess.
Okay.
So I don't think stuff came out till about 2014. So or 2015 rather. So because everything's a year off. So I got the chance. Alfred offered me exclusive status back in 2012, and then I reached out to Bob Phillips, who was doing strings at the time, and mentioned this to him, and I was a middle school band and orchestra director. So then I ended up doing some things for him. And then I had written a piece for a Pennsylvania MEA district band, middle school band, and I had sent that to George McGaw, who at the time was the Bellwin band editor for Alfred. And anyways, that led to, oh, you're exclusive. I didn't know that you were even. So then they started giving me assignments and everything like that. So I actually do more concert band writing for Alfred than I do anything else. So,
and I think I reached out to you because you've written, what's the easiest grade level you've written for?
0.5.
0.5. Yeah, that's what I thought. So
I just did one of those, and it's really really not easy to do and make
No,
it sound good.
no.
Oh
My
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 lord.
my, my daughter played in a sixth grade honor band, and was it
Mhm.
is it Great Beginnings? Is that the name of the piece?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and is that a grade one?
That's it. That's in that they have it
Or is it
marketed
half?
as a point five. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. It's because of how the rhythms are written in it and the intervallic relationships that we use in
sure.
them. Yeah, yeah.
So the two pieces of yours we're going to listen to are not of that grade level.
No.
Let's listen to Continuance first. What's that about?
So it's a grade 3.5 band piece. It's I didn't have a title for it when I got with it. My wife came up with the title because I continually morph these themes throughout it. So she said, "Why don't you just call it Continuance?" And, okay, that's a great idea. So Debbie penned the title on that one for me. But it's basically two different themes that get worked over and over and over again, and in various formats. And it's part of our Performance Plus series at Alfred and Baldwin. And it's I don't know if you're familiar with this series. It's we're going to do the second release in the series this year. And what it is it's digital only for the time being. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to come in print over time, but it's a digital only release. It's in Make Music Cloud with videos from every piece in the series has videos and exercises written specifically for the piece from the composer. And it's a pretty neat interactive series. And you can also just download the performance pieces right directly from Alfred and Pepper and wherever
Sure.
digital sources that you get music from. But I'm very happy with the way this piece turned out, and let's take a listen.
cool. Great piece.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, that turned out great, and the ending sounds like I listened to too much television in the '70s and '80s, but that's okay.
All
But
right. All right.
yeah,
And the last piece we're going to listen to, tell us about that.
we're derivations. There's two versions of this. There's the version that we're going to listen to. There's also a flex version of this, and this is written for um, our. I wrote it to be inclusive for our cluster concerts here in Damascus, where we put the middle school and high school students together.
Oh,
But
great.
it comes in at the grade 2.5 level. And it's a lot of fun to play. A lot of independence in the parts. It's there's block writing, but there's a lot of independent writing. My grade 2 stuff. I'm not the everybody moving all together at the same time kind of writing. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not me. So
Yep.
it's quite challenging to play. It morphs from 4/4 to 3/4. The B section is in 3/4. I think we're going to hear up to we're going to hear into the second time the B themes comes back with some development. I think is what we're going to hear. So,
All right, let's take a listen. All right. So again, it's been great to listen to all your music today, and I just wanted to highlight
thanks,
we were just talking as well the importance of programming. You know, you said that, and it made my heart happy because I've done a bunch of episodes on programming, whether it's just playing a bunch of recordings for people, or I've talked with people like Ansvi Rose about programming and things like that. It's just so important choosing the right level. And I just wanted to mention, you mentioned one of your pieces was written for a flex series as well. For
this last one, yeah.
for people who don't know what that is, that's where you can basically assign any part to any instrument within reason to fit the strengths of your band. And it's really a wonderful thing. So if people haven't used the Flex series, they should consider it if they're in situations.
There's some jazz flex tracks too, as
Yep.
well. Some of the publishers have done some jazz flex tunes, and it works out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the programming, I was always taught by one of my mentors that programming was 90% of the battle.
It is. You have to know. It's. You have to know where your kids are at, where you want. You have to meet them where they're at, and then have a sense of, am I going to have this window? Are they going to be able to master this in this window? And then my wife always talks about this too, is beginning with the end in mind. No, like if you know that you want to be playing, this piece by the end of the year, well, you have to build the skill sets throughout the year and reinforce that so that by the time we get to the end of the year, that it's going to be in your students' wheelhouse, and they're going to be successful, and it's going to sound good, and they're going to be happy with it and proud of themselves for doing it, rather than, oh, we kind of sort of did it, or we missed the mark, and that's on us to do that. So,
and you used a really important word, the word master, because I think so many times if we program too high, the kids can just get through it. But if you give them time to get to the finer points in the music making process, that young bands can sound really good as long as you're programming appropriately.
oh, absolutely, and finding that lit that works. We all had go-to, like favorite writers, but that doesn't necessarily, cut it all the time. You have to make sure that it's students are going to buy in. That's the whole thing too. You want to make sure that they're going to buy into the piece. I know when I've gone out and done some of these honors bands this year, I retired this last year, and I'm still doing those. I'm still doing a little bit of conducting and just making sure that the students are going to buy in on what you pick. And when you have a limited number of hours with an honors group, that's like, oh Lord, is this really going to work or not? But I think teachers are also sometimes, especially young teachers, are a little reluctant. Like when they get in it, sometimes you don't, you're into a piece and it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of it. I think as we get older and we get more experience, we hear that that's not going to happen, and it's like, okay, that for whatever reason we thought it was going to work, and it's okay that it didn't work, but don't. It's not a square peg in a round hole. Don't force it.
I will usually pull a piece after one read through. I've gotten to a point where if they don't read it at 60-70%, and then I'll pull it, and sometimes kids will say, oh, they're frustrated with that or whatever. I'd say, look, I just don't think it's a good fit for us right now. It's not that they can't play it or whatever, but
everybody's gauge is different on that. But yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that if it's not working, it's not going to work. Don't waste time on it. There's so much good lit out there that it's, and we all expose ourselves, our students to, that came out wrong, expose our students to great lit, and
sure.
We want to make sure that we are, we're always putting good music in front of them and asking the most of them, but we have to find that fine line of making sure that we're being true to our students, and we're being true to the writer as well, and making music off.
Words of wisdom. I love it.
All right,
great. Thanks so much for being with us, Mike.
This was fun, Kyle. I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be here, and I'm happy that this all worked out. So.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.